I said, I remember he doing something like this before. Let me ask him first. So that's why I called you.
Yeah, I'm a company secretary also.
Okay, great. So I know where I stand now.
Yeah.
Give me a couple of days.
Okay. Just give me a minute. Okay, let's begin. In September 1928, yeah, that's where I need to just a minute, 1 minute. Okay, let's have a quick look. Next session in PARAMPARā-VAIBHAVA will begin with in September 1928, which is this. And in September 1928, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati laid the foundation for a major new temple on just 3 acres adjoining the Ganga in Bagh Bazar, Calcutta. The complex was envisioned to be a far more opulent and sizable structure than the previous, with all facilities and accoutrements additional equipments suitable for a dynamic and prominent religious movement. The location was of great spiritual significance, as evidenced by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's repeatedly stating during a visit to the building site, Mahaprabhu must have blessed this place with the touch of his divine feet. There is no doubt about it. On the way from Barahanagar, Mahaprabhu definitely stopped here on the bank of the Ganga and performed Sankirtan with his associates. Speaking thus, he became overwhelmed by transcendental emotion. Sri Bhaktisaranga Goswami guessed that is probably why this land remained vacant for so long. Otherwise, there being so many available plots in Calcutta, how has this one become the site for the new mutt? Sri Jagabandhu Bhaktiranjan Prabhu. Bhaktiranjan was a title. The title given by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, the sole donor, took charge of construction and pushed hard to quickly realize the project. But after 2 years of intense effort and a few postponed openings, it remained unfinished, mostly because Jagabandhu Prabhu refused to compromise on quality and his ever adding some new ornate decoration. Finally, it was decided to occupy the buildings in their incomplete condition. On 12 October 1930, the Liberty reported, on Sunday, the 5th of October last, the streets of North Calcutta were scenes of a record procession on the occasion of the new Gaudiya Mutt constructed in Bagh Bazar. Devotees from different provinces of India, Bengal, Assam, Bihar, Orissa, Madras, United Provinces, and the Punjab had been pouring into Calcutta for days before the ceremony. Since Sunday morning, sympathizers and disciples began to gather at the premises of the old Gaudiya Mutt, and toward noon, its surroundings extending up to Circular Road and Maniktola Junction presented the view of a vast sea of heads. Hundreds of Sankirtan parties from different quarters of Calcutta and suburbs, varieties of concert and band parties joined the procession. The Sri Vigrahas of the Gaudiya Mutt, Sri Gaur Vinod Anandji, preceded and followed by congregational chant of the holy name, mounted on a most sumptuously decorated car, Rath, were on the move at 2:30 p.m. amidst deafening shouts of Harinam by the vast multitude in unison with the devotees of the mutt. Conch shells were blown, various kinds of music began to play, Veda mantras and selected Sanskrit hymns were being chanted, and the concerted sound of Sankirtan seemed to rend the skies as the car rolled on at the instance of Paramahamsa Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, the Acharya of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Preceded and followed by innumerable devotees with flags, festoons, silver rods, and silver spears. The procession was about 2 miles long. The whole city seemed to be in a tremor, and it was a sight for the gods to see. The car was a piece of true artistic beauty in perfect keeping with the solemn occasion. In charming costumes, the soul enrapturing beauty of the Sri Vigrahas on the car was the cynosure of all eyes. They attracted everyone's eyes. Millions of eager visitors thronged the footpaths, corridors, and roofs throughout the route of the procession. Calcutta had not witnessed such a gigantic religious procession within the memory of its oldest citizens. The procession, which consisted of no less than 43 distinct sections, was formed inside the line by about 25,000 persons on a rough estimate. All classes of people joined the parade, including several dignitaries of the secular world. The windows and verandas overlooking the 2-mile route, which took nearly 4 hours to traverse, was packed with ladies taking darshan from above the crowd. The Gaudiya described the event. Today, the city of Calcutta has become stunned. Everyone left his daily work meant for maintaining his belly. When the tumultuous sound of kirtan was heard on the streets of Calcutta, all the people were attracted, left what they were doing, and came dashing into the street. The devotees accompanying the chariot were singing. How do you pronounce this? No. This is some ancient English which I need to discover. No. Merriam-Webster's. That.
Wiki dictionary, heraldic for of cold spot in black fire.
No. PWN. Here it is. No, it's not a fur. Okay, PAEAN. Let me have a look at that. What is this? Cat.
Chant a song, especially at him.
Yeah, where is that? What is that? What is the spelling of that?
PAEAN.
How do you pronounce it in the first place? Paean. It's a joyous song or hymn of praise, tribute, thanksgiving, or triumph. A work that praises or honors its subject. So that's called a paean. So the devotees accompanying the chariot were singing a paean, composed by Srila Saraswati Thakur, especially for the occasion. These verses were later popularized. Matala Harijana Vishaya Range, Pujala Ragapatha Gaurava Bhange, Brahmalo Chadi Bhoga Chinmaya Bange, Thavala Patipati Bhakata Sange, Chadala Paraghar Archita Gange, Bujhala Rasa Nite, Nachato Dhange. Although apparently absorbed in material affairs, Hari's own people were actually worshipping on the spontaneous path and thus broke the mood of reverential worship. That's the translation. This is nothing but a translation. Although apparently absorbed in material affairs, Hari's own people were actually worshipping on the spontaneous path and thus broke the mood of reverential worship. Having rejected mundane enjoyment, they wandered in spiritual Bengal, running on the roads with other devotees, giving up another's house and worshipping the Ganga. They danced gracefully with understanding of the workings of rasa. The parade attracted so much attention that a local cinema, local theater, replayed film coverage of it for 9 consecutive days. The crowd pressure on opening day bent a solid iron banister at the mutt. So when the Acharya comes, this is what happens when Rupa Goswami's secretary starts a movement. The Gaudiya Mutt had begun as a small group of idealists with practically no money or assets. But after the inauguration of this grand temple, the mission became fantastic and prosperous. Bounteous funds were received, wonderful festivals held, and many new devotees recruited. Dr. Dinesh Chandra Sen, DC Sen, big name, D.Lit, Doctorate of Literature, Professor of Bengali Literature at the University of Calcutta and a distinguished writer, summarized popular appreciation of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. What you have achieved is imperishable. What you have done, we could never have even conceived. Everything of ours is going toward degradation. Only you have protected everyone by performing this noble task. What you will do in the future will inspire everyone, not just Bengal or India. In November 1928, Srila Saraswati Thakur visited Kurukshetra at the time of a solar eclipse. There he simultaneously cultured the mood of the gopis when they visited Kurukshetra to meet Krishna, spoke the message of Lord Chaitanya to throngs of pilgrims, and on the bank of the sacred Brahma Kunda inaugurated a theistic exhibition along with the new Vyasa Gaudiya Mutt. For each Gaudiya Mutt, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur often had a name. Madhva Gaudiya Mutt, Vyasa Gaudiya Mutt, Rup Sanatan Gaudiya Mutt, like that. On 25 November 1928, the Amrita Bazar Patrika reported the annual celebrations of Sri Vyasa Gaudiya Mutt, a Punjab branch at Kurukshetra of Sri Chaitanya Mutt of Sri Mayapur, lasting for 2 weeks, have been conducted with signal success. Every one of the 10 lakh pilgrims was delighted to have darshan of His divine grace, Paramahamsa, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, and to witness the most picturesque demonstration of the real meaning and spiritual significance underlying the bathing ceremony here by means of installing very beautiful deities. The devotees of the mutt clearly explained everything to the audience in Hindi, Urdu, and English. Many princes, chiefs, rajas, zamindars, merchants, sadhus, high government officials, both Indian and European, and other respected persons in large numbers gladly listened every day, both morning and evening, to the Paramahamsa Maharaj, explaining the superiority and highest rationality of the religion of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. After the throngs had dissipated, Srila Saraswati Thakur toured the numerous holy sites in the area, beginning with a visit in Thanishwar to the home of a reputed medieval saint named Jagannath. There, Srila Saraswati Thakur commented that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had visited Kurukshetra during the solar eclipse in August 1514. August 1514. And in that very house had instructed Jagannath on devotion in the mood of separation. He revealed that the deity of Kali in the ancient temple at Thaneshwar was she who had killed the dacoits attempting to sacrifice Jadabharat. Oh, that's very interesting. Good to know. While in that region, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati also visited Shuktala, the sacred place where Srila Shukadeva Goswami had recited Srimad Bhagavatam to Maharaj Parikshit and many attendant sages 5,000 years before. Later, he expressed a desire that an ideal training center in Bhagavatam teachings be established there. So, anyone hearing, let me read it out again. Later, he expressed a desire that an ideal training center in Bhagavatam teachings be established there. So, this is one of the many to-dos we have. So, anybody interested can take it up. We'll be blessed by the power of Bhaktisiddhanta. I thought we had a center in Shuktala. I don't know.
Many are there planning to open a center. Yes. Institution center.
Yeah. Great. In the Naimisharanya here, Navadip Mandal also we should open. 1930 to 33. Like great acharyas before him, Srila Saraswati Thakur expanded his activities through his disciples, who preached in several places that he never or only occasionally visited. It seemed unlikely that a religious sect from Bengal could expect much success in Assam. The Assamese had traditionally maintained a strong provincial spirit, being determined to preserve an ethnic identity distinct from their inveterate rivals in Bengal and Manipur. Their long-term rivals in neighboring Bengal and Manipur. They were particularly leery, cautious, wary of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement brought to Manipur by Bengali preachers some 300 years before and adopted as the state religion, superseding previous customs. The Assamese had their own brand of Vaishnavism, more impersonal than devotional, whose theology and rituals were quite dissimilar to those of Gaudiya Vaishnava Dharma, and they were not inclined to easily relinquish it. Nevertheless, mostly by the vigorous and tenacious efforts, tending to keep a firm hold of something. So this is how you have to preach. Tenacious efforts of Sripad Nimananda Seva Tirtha, an Assamese disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Initial opposition to the Gaudiya Math in Assam gradually slackened and transformed into widespread acceptance. Hundreds of Assamese submitted themselves as disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, who on his second trip there became so impressed upon observing the throngs of villagers bringing bags of rice and other donations and expressing natural enthusiasm for bhakti that he promised to thenceforth visit once a year, although ultimately he did not again visit Assam. In January 1930, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati attended Kumbh Mela at Prayag. He preached amid the lakhs of pilgrims and sent his disciples into the throngs to do likewise. While in Prayag, he also installed large deities of Shri Radha Krishna at Sri Rupa Gaudiya Math, at that time still in a rented property. During this period, Srila Saraswati Thakur went to South India 3 times on a whirlwind tour starting late in December 1930, in January 1932 to Madras for installing deities and to accept Vyasa Puja, and a more prolonged visit in the summer of 1932. In November 1931, Srila Saraswati Thakur had Srimad Bon Maharaj convey a spiritual message to Lord Willingdon, the Viceroy of India. In October 1932, he conducted the Rajmandal Parikrama with throngs of disciples and other pilgrims, and then journeyed to Haridwar to lay the foundation for the Sri Saraswata Gaudiya Math. On 30 October 1931, at a site overlooking the hallowed, which means holy, Triveni, the confluence of the 3 holy rivers, Ganga, Yamuna, and the unmanifest Saraswati, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati laid the foundation stone for the new temple of the Sri Rupa Gaudiya Math. And on 21 November 1932, the foundation stone for the lecture hall of Sri Rupa Gaudiya Math was laid by Sir William Malcolm Haley, Governor of the United Provinces, who completed his address thus: "Let me conclude by wishing it success in an effort that, because it is non-sectarian and non-political and teaches a high ideal of universal goodwill, cannot but secure the sympathy of all who would see greater peace and harmony in a troubled world." On 24 November, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati consecrated deities of Shri Radha Govinda at the Sri Sanatan Gaudiya Math in Banaras, Varanasi. Then proceeded to Calcutta and Mayapur. In December, he went to Dhaka, where he inaugurated a theistic exhibition and lectured daily to the learned elite there. In a lecture given in 1933, Srila Saraswati Thakur commented on his propaganda activities. "I saw in Madras and the UP means United Provinces at that time, Central India, that when the royalty came to see me, there were also security personnel there to protect and attend them. There were always 10 or 20 men dressed in red protecting us also. But we are without wealth or possessions. These men feed and clothe me and take care of my health. Thus, though my physical condition is very poor, I run all over from the ocean to Himachal. Reaching everywhere, Sri Chaitanya's message, Shuddha Bhakti Siddhanta Vani, has become the main work of my life. Many feel that this task is very difficult, whether considered individually or collectively. Hence, they should be able to forgive me. Chapter 5. Troubling undercurrents. Foppery. Let's have a look what it means. Fop means a man who is concerned with his clothes and appearance in an emotional and excessive way, and foppery is that symptom when you see somebody who is very much concerned with his appearance excessively. Sloth, reluctance to work, laziness. As the Gaudiya Math continued to grow, it attracted more money and prestige. Yet with these came problems. Up until around 1930, when the marble temple in Bagh Bazaar was opened, most devotees who joined the mission were serious about spiritual life. And the mood was buoyant and lively. Buoyant, cheerful, optimistic. But while preaching, temple construction and other devotional activities continued unabated. They continued, they did not stop, they were not affected. Lethargy, laziness, backbiting, criticism of one another, and other prejudicial propensities gradually infiltrated. Srila Saraswati Thakur saw seeds of worldly attachment taking root in the very institution he had founded for expelling iniquity or expelling immoral behavior from the world. So that which he wanted to drive out, he saw that coming back in. Many Mathavasis became increasingly idle, their days largely consumed by cooking, eating, washing the pots, and then resting, then again rising, cooking, eating, washing the pots, and so on. Srila Saraswati Thakur would lament, our ashram is a joint mess. I need to explain, this is all Indian English. Mess is a place where people get together and eat. I think it is still used in certain circles. It is a joint mess, meaning that it's just a collection of different places where people just get together and eat. A place simply for eating and sleeping. He would quote Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhalo mando khai heri pori chintahin, nahi bhavi ei deho chadibo kon din. Sometimes I eat nicely, sometimes not. I see this and that, dress as I like, and have no worries at all. I'm so carefree that I never consider that one day I will have to give up this body. It's from one of the poems of Thakur Bhaktivinoda. He warned that to collect funds and convert them into stool and urine and to live like monkeys is not the business of the Gaudiya Math. It is not the business of ISKCON also. It appeared that certain of his leading disciples were becoming ever motivated by desires for popularity, honor, plaudits, praise, and position. But Srila Saraswati Thakur deemed this inevitable because for propagating Shuddha Bhakti, the institution was collecting money from materialists, along with which came poison to be ingested. When you take money from materialistic people, then a portion of their consciousness also comes to you. So you have to suffer with that. That is a collateral risk. It is an occupational hazard. When at Bagh Bazaar, a visitor commented, it seems as if some of your preachers are losing their edge. Srila Saraswati Thakur replied, I established this mud for Hari Bhajan. What happens to those who do not perform bhajan is now manifesting. As early as 1927, he penned an appeal for unity. Surrounded by enemies, we are serving the Lord and his devotees with great determination. Each of us, more or less, becomes forgetful of service to Krishna, being servants of our six enemies. Six enemies. Kama, Krodha, Moha, Lobha, Madamatsarja. Kama, Krodha, Moha, Lobha, Madamatsarja. Lust, anger, greed, pride, delusion, envy. My plea to all of you is to unite and serve the Lord in a spirit of friendship and cooperation, each having the same goal in your hearts. Ekaki amar nahi pai bal. Alone I obtain no strength. Remember this and perform kirtan yagya in unison. The indispensable good quality expected of those in charge of kirtan yagya is to have friendship with all Vaishnavas and execute devotional service by pleasing all Vaishnavas. Despite bewailing the plight of the organization he had founded, despite lamenting over the plight of the situation, the unfortunate situation of the organization he had founded, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati never commented disparagingly about it. He never said that it was of little worth. He didn't say that it was worthless and so on. For he did not accept that the quintessential Gaudiya Math could be polluted by the misbehavior of any delinquent members, of any member who is failing in his duties. The quintessential Gaudiya Math, meaning the actual spiritual Gaudiya Math. He distinguished between an actual Gaudiya Math and this external manifestation in the form of this movement with all these people, property and all that. He delineated the difference between genuine disciples and motivated followers, between the real transcendental Gaudiya Math and its outer semblance and its outer appearance. So the Krishna consciousness movement was manifested. It has an outer aspect during Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's time, the Gaudiya Math, and now ISKCON and various organizations which have come out of the Gaudiya Math. All of these are as spiritual to whatever extent we are surrendered non-duplicitously to the instructions of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. By in itself, we cannot simply imagine that whatever goes on in these organizations and we simply follow them, that is pure devotional service. Because if it is like saying, I'll simply do whatever the hospital says, and you don't even check whether your fever is going down or not. That is Niyama Agraha. Sri Gaudiya Math does not and cannot have anything in common with those who duplicitously join it with a motive to misuse divine knowledge to serve their own selfish ends. I'll simply paraphrase this to mean Krishna's representatives do not and cannot have anything in common with those who duplicitously join their movements with the motive to misuse divine knowledge to serve their own selfish ends. Feigned Diksha. Feigned Diksha. Pretend, when you pretend to take Diksha, these are all expressions he actually used in Bengali. You can pretend to take Diksha. Diksha actually has two aspects, an external aspect and an internal aspect. Externally, we receive 5 samskaras according to the rules and regulations of the Pancharatrika scriptures. We receive a holy name, we receive different things we receive. Okay, that's a yagya which is conducted, different things are done. Then internally, Diksha Kale Bhakta Kare Atma Samarpan. Internally, the devotee is meant to surrender himself unto Krishna's lotus feet. Atma Samarpan means Atma Nivedan, which refers to Sharanagati, which refers to the 6 items of surrender. Surrender unto the Supreme Lord in order to become fully qualified to attain progress from Sadhana Bhakti to Bhava Bhakti to Prema Bhakti, which automatically implies that we have no desire for material happiness in this life, material happiness in next life, or any of the types of liberation even. Anything, but if externally I go through the 5 samskaras, but internally I am not surrendering unto Krishna in this particular manner, then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in his essays and elsewhere, he says this is just fake diksha on the part of the disciple. The guru may be bona fide, but in this case, the disciple is not fully bona fide. Feigned diksha and attainment of divine knowledge are never identical. Obtainment of divine knowledge is the English rendition of Divya Jnana Prapti. Diksha, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur at other times has also explained what it means. He quoted a scriptural statement that Srila Jiva Goswami quotes in Bhakti Sandarbha. Diksha is derived from two syllables, di and ksha. And di is derived from the expression divya jnana, divine knowledge, which means internal direct knowledge. Right now, we are just like a blind man who has been blind since birth. He may know many things happening in his house, but that is indirectly through his other senses. He indirectly knows. He has some knowledge of what's happening. If a cat comes and hits the milk bowl and all that, he can more or less sense that these things are happening. So that means he has some knowledge, that is indirect knowledge. But a person with eyesight, he can see the cat hitting that milk bowl and running away. So he has direct knowledge. So when the spirit soul is fully self-realized and God-realized, then with the eyes of the soul, we are able to see Krishna. Premanjanachurita bhakti vilochanena santas sadaiva hridayeshu vilokayanti. That is called divya jnana, divine knowledge. Paroksha jnana. Pareshanubhava bhakti pareshanubhavo viraktaranyatracha. So divyam jnanam yato dadya puryat papasya sankshayam tasmad diksheti sa prokta deshikai sattva kovidai. Those who are expert in knowing the truth about Diksha, they declare that by which one attains such divine knowledge, direct knowledge of the Supreme Lord, and by which all sinful reactions are vanquished. That they know is Diksha. You might refer to it as internal Diksha. Feigned Diksha refers to the external participation and obtaining Pancha Samskaras, the five sacraments. So these are never identical. It's not that externally I go through the motion. I promise my Guru different things and I receive a name, but I have not surrendered unto Krishna's lotus feet, and therefore the process internally has not begun, and therefore it is not the same as divine knowledge, attainment of divine knowledge. So it is not Diksha in its internal sense. Sri Chaitanya and his sincere devotees are eternally present in Sri Gaudiya Math. Owlish persons incapable of seeing the light are called Mayavadis, Karmis, or wayward non-devotees. Owlish persons. Persons who are owl-like. Owls cannot see the sun. Even though the sun is there, they prefer to become dynamic at night when the sun is set. There are a number of persons, not just, in general, we notice this in Vaishnava organizations, including our organization. There are a number of persons who are there for various other motives. How do we know that? You create an arrangement by which they can never ever attain that motive, then you get to see their reality. That's when you get to see what they are in reality. If a place is dark and damp, you'll naturally attract many cockroaches. If it is bright and dry and clean, you won't. So those who are jnanis, karmis, and anyavilashis, people interested in immediate adharmic sense enjoyment, they cannot see, they're incapable of seeing, and they're incapable of detecting the true presence of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In the same way, I have the audacity to say that the most important and most neglected member of ISKCON is Lord Krishna himself, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When we say that you should increase your chanting, or you should serve the deities, you should read Bhagavatam, or you should serve the holy Dham, when there is much reluctance, and we can detect that there's not much of attraction towards Krishna. Similarly, these statements have been made by the powerful acharyas to remind us that we need to be alert. In a lecture of 1932, Srila Saraswati Thakur stated how some disciples considered that by his spending profusely on preaching programs and printing, he was embezzling their hard-earned collections. They thought he is embezzling their money. He thought he is stealing their money. On what basis do they think like that? Because they collected money. So they collect money and therefore they think that it's mine. But that's ridiculous. That's like a cashier thinking that he owns the money of the bank. He mentioned by name a particular leading devotee as one of several who thought it better to keep those funds in the bank. But he continued, my aim is not to make provisions and lay bricks for rascals who will come in the future. Possibly the structures already made will one day become dens of ganja and vice. Prabhupada also has stated that if our leaders are not ideal, ISKCON will become a fool's paradise. We make up ISKCON. We make ISKCON, we can also break ISKCON. It is our duty to make ISKCON. It is our service to Lord Krishna. We have to make it the ISKCON that Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati want. He further commented that some of his men had voiced the opinion that now there were enough books and magazines, so all printing activities should be scrapped. There was no need for further hard work, for by showing the deity and receiving collections, the Madhvasis could live happily. These attitudes are still going on. A sannyasi once returned from a speaking engagement and declared, I delivered a superb speech that was much appreciated. So I shouldn't take ordinary rice prasad. Cook puris for me. When Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati heard of this, he became disappointed and said, Purilam Shannasi Hoy Gelo Vilasi. I made them renunciants, but they became voluptuaries. Voluptuary, it means a person who is excessively greedy for different types of sense enjoyment. A ditty, a statement he often repeated in his later years. He often stated that several of his sannyasis were giving lectures simply to acquire prestige. He sometimes referred to the Babugiri, foppishness of a number of his disciples. And in a lecture at the end of 1932, he particularly addressed the sannyasis. For the sake of sincere Hari Seva, to facilitate the smooth progress of worldwide preaching of Harikatha, I am giving the preachers thousands upon thousands of vehicles and have no objection to that. But why get into a car if you consider it something material? Such persons have no right to get in a car. If they do, they will become sense enjoyers. The car should not be given to those eager to ride it, not for the sake of serving Hari Guru Vaishnavas, but to flaunt their own grandeur, who by deeming it material become sense enjoyers and travelers on the path to hell. For such persons, using cars becomes a means of livelihood. Why should persons who do not with body, mind and word sincerely serve the Lord, who do not give their very selves for serving Hari Guru Vaishnavas, ride in cars? Again, if another edition of the Sarjya Sampradaya increases, then we are as good as dead. Therefore, I had proposed that all Tridanda Sannyasi should come to Ekayana Matha and no further go for Bhiksha. Bhiksha, collecting alms, fundraising. Instead, I will go begging and feed you. Why do you imitate me? I am not a Tridandi, I am fallen. You are all purifiers, not fallen like I. Is there anything wrong in my considering you purifiers and making you gurus? Deeming you as purifiers, I have made you into gurus. So why do you pretend to be anything else? The Tridandi beggars should at every moment be engaged in Hari Seva with body, mind and words. With what hope we came to serve Hari and what position we have now come to. Attempting to drive out institutional dross, institutional rubbish. In a letter of 25 April 1933, he gave a warning via a series of instructions to certain seemingly intractable, hard to control Mathavasis, residents of the Maths. If our Hari Bhajan decreases, then our outlook will become like that of materialists and will devour us. Whatever sannyasis do for personal sense gratification should be done by going barefoot, never using shoes nor conveyances. They should not even use the worst vehicles, let alone the first class ones. They should never accept service from another. They should never engage anyone to rub their body with oil or massage their feet. I've been told that sometimes even brahmacharis have other brahmacharis to massage their body with oil or massage their feet and so on. All of this goes on. Gormandizing, eating good food excessively, and making independent arrangements for eating are to be wholly forsworn. Sannyasis should never go to a physician or take medication according to their own wish. It is the duty of a sannyasi to serve them non-sannyasis. A sannyasi residing within a mutt should give up the mentality, I am to be worshipped and served, and reside in the mutt for the sake of serving all others. Otherwise, he should return home. Excessive babugiri, excessive dressing up, show off, drinking too much milk, and luxurious eating should be completely forsworn. Sri Gopi Prandan also told me that the actual rules for the renounced order of life are very restrictive. And he said, actually, we'll have to deal with these. We cannot just imagine these rules don't exist. These are real rules which are meant for real people. There is no need for bodybuilders to reside in the mutt, nor should it be like a gentleman's club. Only devotees should stay in the mutt. Strengthening the senses by taking medicines and tonics and trying to spread one's domination to attract others' wives or desiring to do so should entirely be given up. We should always remember that Krishna is the only Lord and enjoyer of all, and that I am the servant of everybody. One should serve a devotee according to his level of bhakti. According to the devotees, that devotee, the object of service, according to his level of bhakti. We cannot attain any auspiciousness as long as we are not delivered from the evil elephant of considering that others should serve us. The fire of lust that burns for sensual indulgence should be extinguished. A brahmachari should not wish to become a sannyasi to procure enhanced sense enjoyment. The desire to dominate is not at all devotional service. To consider a sannyasi a vilasi, sensualist, and wanting to become a sannyasi with that motive should be totally rejected. When a sannyasi needs any item, it is the duty of Matavasis to take care of his requirement. If a sannyasi is free from false ego, then the Matavasis should serve him. One who indulges his senses and is deceptive cannot serve the Lord or his devotees. We should be most careful that no type of babugiri, no type of foppishness enters the Sri Chaitanya Mutt, Sri Gaudiya Mutt, and associated mutts, which would ruin the sannyasis, grihasthas, and brahmacharis. The examples that we are getting should not be tolerated. Like the sannyasis, the householder should overcome the urges of desire and anger. We must be alert not to fall to the same condition as persons creating their own misfortune by being averse to serving Hari Guru Vaishnavas. Bragging, self-praise, foppery, show off, and deceitfulness are to be wholly given up by Matavasis, residents of the monastery. We should never forget that Krishna is to be served at every moment, and even more indispensable is service to Vaishnavas. There must not be any unnecessary attendant, and sannyasis or preachers must not be provided with any vehicles unless solely for the church's use. Church refers to the mission. If sannyasis must go to a shop or dispensary for any reason other than service to the mutt, they should go on foot. Even if the car is idle, still they should not take it. They should not use any conveyance. In other words, there's a very clear distinction made here between all the so-called Yukta Vairagya that we imagine that we are doing and service to Krishna. For service to Krishna, all kinds of objects can be used. But for doing the needful and taking care of Krishna's property all in the name of Yukta Vairagya. That should be minimized. The Matha is not a place for Babugiri. The spiritual hospital is not meant for its patients to display foppery. It is better if they behave that way by staying at home. Instead of wearing red, they can be clad in white cloth with a kacha and sent back home. Those who want foppery, opulent provender, and medicine can go back home and care for their family. Then they will not have to identify themselves with the mutt. Sannyasis who do not indulge in foppery should be recognized as Gaudiya Mutt sannyasis. The rest should be sent back home. Even if consequently our manpower depletes, still it is better. Between preaching is the essence and purity is the force. Purity is the force is more important. If those who have taken shelter of the mutt but are motivated by their bellies and genitals are driven away, the expenses of the mutt will be reduced and also worldly disturbances. Those who come to render devotional service are brahmacharis, grihasthas, vanaprasthas, and sannyasis. The mutt will not give shelter to persons who do not perform devotional service, for they are enemies of the mutt. I have rendered so much service to the mutt, so I will ride in the car, boss others around, and demand respect. I must have a big share in the leadership and management of the mutt. That mentality should never be encouraged. Such is the talk of mundane householders. Those serving the mutt should do so with no expectation of return. The jiva invites difficulties by carping about, by simply being critical, scandalizing, and unnecessarily gossiping about others. One should always covet, one should always hanker for auspiciousness. One can control his mind and extirpate, completely remove, eradicate completely residual desires, residual material desires by serving the holy name, which means we endeavor to increase the quality and quantity of our chanting while endeavoring to give up sinful activities and offenses. End of quote. Similarly, in the essay, Bodo Ami o Bhalo Ami. Now, Ami means I. Bodo means great. Bhalo means good. Ami means I. Bengali. The great I and the good I. Srila Saraswati Thakur alluded to the fermenting disquiet among his disciples, the growing restlessness, worry amongst his disciples. Therein, he analyzed the intrinsic nature of the materialistic consciousness that induces an aspiring devotee to attempt to become big Bodo rather than good Bhalo, and thus sidetracks him from the precious goal of Shuddha Bhakti. But despite Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's endeavors to keep the mission pure, many of his disciples did not care to fully submit themselves to his instructions. For instance, it was well known that some devotees went to the yatra performances or the cinema, which mostly showed religious films, yet were forbidden for Gaudiya Mutt members. These yatra performances were also quite materialistic. Not losing heart, Srila Saraswati Thakur continued to dynamically expand propaganda efforts. He continued touring extensively throughout India, from the Himalayas and Assam down to the southern tip, and from his headquarters in Bengal westward to the Arabian Sea. Desiring to bring Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings to places where they were little known, he established more new mathas in major cities outside Bengal and Orissa. With a party of senior devotees, he would go to a city where known sympathizers resided, and with their help conduct lecture and kirtan programs, gradually attracting support while looking for a suitable house to rent as a preaching center. As soon as such a base was secured and activities inaugurated, he would move on, leaving one or two competent disciples to continue the work. After a fledgling congregation had sufficiently developed, he would return to install deities. In this way, temples were gradually founded at Lucknow, New Delhi, Patna, Haridwar, Gaya, and Bombay. Although generally only Bengalis took interest in these new Gaudiya Mutts, eventually several persons indigenous to those locales people native to those places also became disciples of Srila Saraswati Thakur. Executive rivalry amongst the big shots. Despite Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's full involvement in preaching and is striving to keep his followers likewise absorbed, during this period, a serious misunderstanding arose between some of his leading disciples, from which two groups emerged. One centered around Kunja Bihari Prabhu, the main manager of the Gaudiya Math, and the other aligned with Ananta Vasudev Prabhu. Although Vasudev Prabhu had served under Kunja Bihari Prabhu when first joining the mission, soon he also became recognized as a leader. Kunja Bihari was ever busy with financial, legal, and other administrative concerns, and despite being well versed in Gaudiya Siddhanta, did not appear as spiritual as Vasudev Prabhu, was constantly wrapped in kirtan, writing, studying, and explicating Shastra. Kunja Bihari Prabhu and Ananta Vasudev Prabhu had significantly different perspectives on how to best serve the mission. Vasudev Prabhu's associates, mostly intellectuals, producing publications, emphasized purity through intensive bhajan. Kunja Bihari's supporters, involved primarily in matters such as collecting funds and establishing mathas, tended to consider the other group as merely theoretical people, doing little of practical value. These divergent approaches led to considerable strain, yet the differing parties remained united and mutually respectful on the platform of service to their master. Srila Saraswati Thakur explained that the scholarly group was serving his Vani instruction and the worldly active group his Vapu, body. Although both were required, Vani was paramount, for Vapu was meant only to facilitate Vani. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had several articles published anonymously in which, by philosophical analysis and without giving names, he sought to remind erring followers who were continually committing mistakes of the purpose for which they had joined him. For instance, Sebar Khotiyan, a report of service, a 1913 Gaudiya essay, clearly indicated the inadequacies of those Gaudiya Math members who, although ever busy in apparent service, had never properly heard or heeded Saraswati Vani, never heard the message or the actual teachings of Saraswati Thakur. And those seeming Vapu Seva thus merely nourished their lingering desires for Labh, Puja, Pratishtha, for profit, adoration, gain, for profit, honor, and prestige. The main points for the article had been dictated by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati to Ananta Vasudev Prabhu, who, together with Sundarananda Vidya Vinod Prabhu, had then developed it. The accused devotees approached their Gurudev and, to avoid directly blaming him, asked why Vasudeva and Sundarananda had printed it. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati replied, "Whoever cannot tolerate this article has never taken birth in Gaudiya Math. If we are criticized for acting wrongly, no one will excuse us. I too will be culpable. Therefore, it was right to publish it, so that there may be reform. If there is no energy in the powerhouse, then even thousands of light bulbs cannot give illumination. Similarly, without purity and sincerity, there is no use in having many followers in a big institution." See, another way by which he emphasizes purity is the force that is preliminary to preaching his essence. Like he explains here, if you don't have energy in the powerhouse, you don't have electricity, then what is the use of having thousands of light bulbs or 10,000 light bulbs or 1 million light bulbs? It is still going to be dark. That energy is purity. Much malcontent, much dissatisfaction centered on a leading administrator, a grihastha. I'm aware who this is, but I'll simply be quiet. And then when it became obvious that he was speculating, when he was embezzling large sums, the sannyasis and brahmacharis resolved to give him nothing more. They stopped going out for preaching and bhiksha and fundraising and deputed Srimad Sridhar Maharaj Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, to verbalize their concerns to their Gurudev. Srila Saraswati Thakur was pacing up and down the veranda of Sri Gaudiya Math, that means the Calcutta Gaudiya Math, chanting japa when Sridhar Maharaj approached him. Yet he stopped and listened intently. His response was unexpected. Why are you grumbling? Your minds have become distorted. Others may have insufficient judiciousness to care about the absolute goal, but why don't you concentrate on that? Have you come for Hari Bhajan or to count money? Can you not reform your godbrother? If I had to employ a manager as expert as he, I would have to pay a considerable salary. Suppose he is defalcating. Suppose he is actually stealing. Why begrudge him? If you also need money, I will arrange it for you. Sridhar Maharaj bowed his head and admitted our way of thinking was mistaken. He returned to his anxiously waiting godbrothers and explained, we have come to perform bhajan, not to acquire money or prestige. If others are bent on destroying themselves by looting, we shouldn't be preoccupied with them, but should simply focus on our own bhajan. But dissatisfaction with that manager did not cease. After a moneyed godbrother of his passed away, a wealthy godbrother, the wives of the departed devotee transferred their estate to a trust intended for Gaudiya Math work, giving that leading manager a controlling position thereof. When other godbrothers heard of this, they suspected that he would usurp, he would take away the trust property for personal use. Sometime later, that devotee remarked, why are my godbrothers interfering with my business? Thereupon, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati could understand that this previously intimately entrusted associate regarded the mission as simply a material enterprise and thenceforth distanced himself from that disciple. Upon the death of his mother in 1934, that leading manager decided to perform her Shraddha according to Smarta rather than Vaishnava rites. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati sent 3 letters instructing him otherwise, but to no avail. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati lamented that the following of the Smarta method by a prominent Gaudiya Math figure would be the downfall of the mission. Yet when Bhakti Saranga Prabhu complained about the same godbrother, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati responded, if he is still willing to do service, why should I reject him? Bhakti Saranga Prabhu was struck at his Gurudev's largesse, at his Gurudev's generosity, in his overlooking a person's manifest faults, visible faults, to keep alive whatever devotional spirit, pure devotional spirit existed within him. Srila Saraswati Thakur's followers also quarreled over pettier issues, such as occupancy of rooms in the showpiece mutt at Bagh Bazaar. Many years back, a young brahmachari in Purushottam Gaudiya Math, which is opposite our Bhakti Kuti at Jagannath Puri, he told me that he had heard, now that Purushottam Gaudiya Math is connected to one of the Gaudiya Maths, it's a branch. He heard from the, you can say, disciplic line that sometime before Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur passed away, after the Kirtan is over, there is Premadhvani. So there arose a dispute about who would recite Premadhvani. Usually the custom is the senior-most in the assembly should recite the Premadhvani and others will say Jai. So then a whole big conflict started. Somebody said, yeah, I will do. Another said, no, I will do. It became a big mess there. And then Saraswati Thakur, he reported that he came, he heard this, he happened to be there. He came and then he saw, and then he said, I must beg I must submit my apology. First of all, I disobeyed my father, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He told me, what is all these mathas and all these things? If you set up all these mathas, then you will attract all Kanishta Adhikaris. And I told my father, Kanishta Adhikari is better than non-devotee. Let them come. So I disobeyed my father, so I should offer my apologies. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he took Rajas and made them bhikshus, he made them beggars. I have taken beggars and made them Maharajas. So for going against the policy set by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, I should again offer my apologies. And then he went back. Now this is something, whatever is explained here, it is known. It is known. It is not that we are we are a peculiar group which is saying all these things. These things were quite well known. That is Purushottam Gaudiya Math. It is connected to one of the prominent Gaudiya Maths actually. He has heard it and he told. He's not ISKCON man and all that. He's a full-fledged Gaudiya Math. So it was known that these kind of petty issues were there. Deeply disappointed, Srila Saraswati Thakur often quoted the Bengali proverb, Dushto goru chahiye shunna gowal bhalo. Better to have an empty cowshed than a troublesome cow. He would elaborate. There is no need for bad cows that harm others. A single good cow is sufficient. We want a living source, not so-called sannyasis. Living source, like a live wire, a wire which is connected to the mains. You get the electricity out of it. The live wire. It's not, the moment you disconnect it, then it's a dead wire. The wire looks just like a live wire, but it's of no practical use. So we want a living source, not so-called sannyasis. If our mission does not flourish with the real living source, then we will distribute the stones and bricks to the poor for 1 paisa each, or rent the temple to them. If there is no good soul in the mission, I do not want it. I don't need bad cows. Now keep in mind that as much as the Gaudiya Math belongs to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, ISKCON also belongs to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, in case you've never thought about it. During this period, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati became highly critical of certain disciples, beseeching all to put aside their differences and work cooperatively. He often spoke of the need for a cementing policy. He repeatedly tried to correct the unruly and power-hungry, speaking to them individually and also addressing their waywardness in ishtagoshtis, in group meetings, but to little avail. During his last visit to Puri, he instructed ashram residents, all Mathavasis, residents of the Math, should constantly be engaged in serving Hari Guru Vaishnavas and always hear and discuss Hari Katha. If one becomes averse to Hari Katha and Hari Seva, he will again become ensnared in material desires. Then time will be spent in gossiping, rapping others, fighting, and gratifying the senses. And rapping others. If Matavasis do not understand that Vaishnava Seva is the most beneficial activity, they will not progress in devotion. One has to cultivate Shuddha Bhakti by sincerely serving the Vaishnavas and by endeavoring to please them with body, mind, and soul. Of course, we should remember who is a Vaishnava according to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. He has his standard. Despite problems, Srila Saraswati Thakur continued pushing forward the movement and often expressed unmixed appreciation for those devotees who selflessly assisted him. Indeed, during this period, many positive accomplishments were realized. New centers were opened and theistic exhibitions held. In Calcutta, regular lectures attended by the elite of the city were delivered at the prestigious Albert Hall. A milestone was the completion of the publication of a multi-volume edition of Srimad Bhagavatam. Now that was directly instructed, that was a request of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He wanted a full-fledged proper edition of Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhaktivinoda Thakur could not himself do that. He did not have time, and the people also were not very much eager to study. And therefore, Bhaktivinoda Thakur had to write small books, or like he said, give in homeopathic doses. Little. Sugar butter, little. But he wanted the Srimad Bhagavatam should be thoroughly published, a full-fledged edition. The crowning glory of all Gaudiya Math activities came hitherto hitherto came in 1933 with the dispatching of preachers to the west. Early in 1935, the proverbially pious Rai Chaudhary Zamindar family of Baliati, Dhaka district, who of their own accord and at their own cost had already erected the temple and all other buildings of the Sri Gadai Gauranga Math in their village, donated for a plot of prime land in the heart of Dhaka city for constructing permanent premises for Sri Madhva Gaudiya Math, envisioned to include the biggest temple in all East Bengal and Assam. In January 1935, the Governor of Bengal, His Excellency Sir John Anderson, visited the headquarters of the mission in Mayapur. And our Prabhupada, he was the one who brought the governor from the Jalangi to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's place. The Calcutta Statesman, 17 January, observed, the success of the mission's activities is testified to by the visitor of the ruler of the province to Sri Chaitanya Math in Mayapur, which is fast growing into a great center of pilgrimage and settlement. The Vyasa Puja for the 61st anniversary of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's appearance was observed at Puri on 23 February 1935. It was a magnificent function chaired by the King of Puri, Gajapati Ramachandra Dev Bahadur. The next day, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati took his crew on a tour of Sri Purushottam Dham. On 21 April 1935, after visiting the noteworthy sites of Gaya, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati stated, "This is our Guru's place." Srila Madhavendra Puri was in the preceptorial line of Sri Madhva. Srila Ishwar Puri followed after him. And the Supreme Lord Sri Gaurasundar, in his pastime as Jagat Guru, declared the success of his trip to Gaya to be his ideal entrance into the Madhva line. Gaya is a principal venue for the followers of Sri Madhvacharya. Here manifested the source of the flow of Shuddha Bhakti of Sri Brahmamadhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. Hence, it is required that the pure adherents of Swarup Damodar and Srila Rupa Goswami have their own place within this area, made most pious by the touch of the lotus feet of Sriman Mahaprabhu and Srila Ishwara Puripad. For many days I have cherished this hope in my heart. I once came here 29 years ago. Now, after such a long time, it seems that by Krishna's wish, this desire will be fruitful. On the following day, a commodious rented house was inaugurated by Srila Saraswati Thakur as the Gaya Gaudiya Math. Chapter 6, winding up his pastimes. Hints of departure. For several years, preceding, prevenient to his passing away, before his passing away, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati often spoke of its inevitability by referring to the residual portion of my life, or this last stage of my life, or by stating, I don't have much time left, or I do not know how much longer Krishna will keep me here. In 1927, he wrote, just as Maharaj Parikshit listened to Bhagavatam in his last days, I too desire the association of devotees in my final days. Where there is no Harikatha, it doesn't matter how many friends and relatives are there and how comfortable the situation is. In my concluding sojourn, in my concluding visit, such places and associations strike me as extremely unnecessary and undesirable. Around 1930, at the annual festival of the Ramananda Gaudiya Math in Kovur, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati told the devotees taking Mahaprasad there, the sun is about to set. You won't get delicious Mahaprasad like this in the future. Such a function will no longer be held. In a lecture of 1932, Srila Saraswati Thakur noted that from the beginning of his endeavors, even before founding the Gaudiya Math, he had been beset by immeasurable obstacles. In transcendental grief, he lamented that he was deprived of service to Sri Sri Radha Brajamohan and Sri Gaudiya Math. Quoting Sri Advaita Acharya's elliptic instruction to Mahaprabhu to wind up his pastimes, he then stated that now the time has come to sing the song of the Avanti Brahmana. Nunam me bhagavam stushta sarvadevam mayo hari yena nito dashametam nirvedeschatmanah plavaha. Bhagavan Hari, who contains within himself all the demigods, must be satisfied with me. It is he who has brought me to this suffering condition and forced me to experience detachment, which is the boat to carry me over this ocean of material life. From early 1935, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati regularly hinted at his imminent passing. While lecturing in Dhaka, he declared, "Our span of life is short. Our life will be crowned with success if the body wears out while constantly speaking Hari Katha." He himself displayed the paragon of such advice during the annual festival of Sri Gaudiya Math in 1935 by delivering a 16-day series of extraordinary lectures on Srimad Bhagavatam, analyzing in detail its conceptions, theology, and teachings. Feeling increasingly disgusted with several of his disciples, Srila Saraswati Thakur would comment on their proclivity, on their propensity for eating and sleeping, and their having no inspiration for broadcasting the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He lamented that despite having so many disciples, most of them were Kanishtha Adhikaris, fit for Archana, but not for preaching. On seeing that the number of his neophyte disciples was swelling, he decided to depart. This is Prabhupada's observation, our Prabhupada's observation. In the last few years of his manifest presence, he often quoted verses that stress the uselessness of temporal attachments. Tasmadidam jagadashesham asatswarupam swapnabhamastadishanam puruduhkaduhkam tvayeva nityasukabodha tanavanante mayata udyadapi yad saddivava bhati. Therefore, this entire universe, which like a dream is by nature unreal, yet appears real, and thus covers one's consciousness and assails him with repeated miseries. This universe appears real because it is manifested by the potency of illusion emanating from you, whose unlimited transcendental forms are full of eternal happiness and knowledge. Karmanam parinamitvad avirintyad mangalam vipashin nashwaram pashed adrishtam api drishtavat. Important advice here. Material activity is subject to constant transformation. Transformation in Vedanta Darshan generally refers to degradation. And thus, from the planet of Lord Brahma on down, there is simply inauspiciousness. A wise man can understand that just as everything he observes is subject to destruction, so also are all things that he cannot directly see. During this period, he frequently recited, Madhavaham Parinam Nirasha, O Madhava, as a consequence of the distress experienced in trying to enjoy material life. We are forlorn, we are hopeless. He several times narrated the apologue. This is a story which we will come across later on. Moral fable of the wise old monkey, to demonstrate that persons who faithfully abide by the instructions of a genuine guru and thereby engage unflinchingly in Hari Bhakti will certainly attain ultimate welfare. But those who follow evil companions, considering that their aging advisor might be deluded and not know more than anyone else, will undoubtedly reap a disastrous result. If you think that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Prabhupada, there are a lot of spiritual content in them, but they don't know how to deal with this world. This is one of the misconceptions that they had. And you're gone, you're lost. Accompanied by 150 to 200 devotees, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati observed Kartik Vrat in 1935 at Radhakund. During that period, he revealed the depth of his dissatisfaction to his householder disciple, Sri Abhay Charnaravinda, who had come to visit him. He lamented that even in his presence, his foremost disciples were quarreling over trifling arrangements, unimportant, trivial, unimportant arrangements for fleshly comfort, causing him much anguish. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati told Abhay, Agun Jwalbe, fire will burn, indicating that the conflagration of party interests, a fire of party interests would erupt in the Gaudiya Math and destroy it. When we were living in a rented house at Ultadingi, he said, if we could collect 200 or 300 rupees, we were living very nicely. We were happier then. But since getting this marble palace in Bagh Bazaar, There has been friction between our men. Who will occupy this room? Who will occupy that room? Who will be the proprietor of this room? Everyone is planning in different ways. Better to take the marble from the walls, sell it, and use the money to print books. If you ever get money, print books. That instruction is to Prabhupada. That instruction also applies to all those who want to follow Prabhupada. On 4th of November 1935, Saraswati Thakur revealed service to deities at the Kunja Bihari Mutt at Radhakund, and 2 days later established the Pushpa Samadhi of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in a nearby separate building called Vraja Swananda Sukhada Kunj. Swananda Sukhada Kunj is in Godrma Dweep in Navadip Mandal, and in Vraj Mandal, he established a Vraja Swananda Sukhada Kunj. Only by overcoming bitter opposition from the resident Babajis was the Gaudiya Mutt able to acquire these places for worship at Radhakund. Bhaktisaranga Prabhu's go-getting, nothing's impossible plot played a crucial role in procuring the requisite plots. Speaking at the Yoga Peeth on 21 January 1936, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati lambasted materially motivated pseudo-devotees, severely criticized materially motivated pseudo-devotees who had given a bad name to Vaishnava Dharma, and pleadingly exhorted his disciples to follow the example of genuine devotees, not cheaters. He cited the case of a rascal who, by using a human skull as a drinking vessel, had sought to show himself more renounced than Srila Gaura Kishodas Babaji Maharaj and want, give up duplicity, abide by the ideal of great devotees, Anusaran. Do not imitate them, Anukaran. Do not pass your days in idleness. Study Gaudiya and Nadya Prakash daily. The Gaudiya was a weekly magazine. The Nadya Prakash was daily. It was a daily newspaper which had both material content and spiritual content. Obviously, he's talking about studying the spiritual content. May hypocrisy never enter. He cautioned that it was better to be born as an animal, bird, insect, or any of the countless thousands of species than to be a hypocrite, for only a person free from hypocrisy can attain real auspiciousness. The moment we are deceitful, there is absolutely no hope, even in thousands and millions of lifetimes, he said, for attaining the spiritual world. Whereas if we have sinful desires and so on, but we are not duplicitous, then okay, it may take some lifetimes or many lifetimes, but there is still hope. But a person who is engaged in diplomacy, duplicity, hypocrisy, it will simply not work at all. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati in later life during Chaturmasya. In February 1936, Vyasa Puja of Srila Saraswati Thakur was celebrated over 5 days at Srivasangan, where Nityananda Prabhu had performed Vyasa Puja for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. After that, Srila Saraswati Thakur traveled to Calcutta and then to Puri, Alalnath, Dhaka, Kurukshetra, Darjeeling, Mathura, and Vrindavan. During this period, he endured a heart complaint that gradually made him weaker and weaker, but his preaching spirit flourished unabated, without any reduction. Back in Calcutta, a prominent doctor brought by Kunja Bihari Prabhu advised Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati to curtail his continual speaking, which prompted Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati to discourse to him vigorously for almost an hour on the theme, life is meant for glorifying Hari. So if that is stopped, then what need is there to carry on living? Afterward, his disciples joked that the doctor came to treat their guru, but instead was treated by him. Observing his Gurudev's failing health, Bhakti Sudhakar Prabhu asked him who would become the next Acharya. Srila Saraswati Thakur declined to give any name, saying that an Acharya is Swayam Prakash, self-manifested, and cannot be appointed. See, the Acharya that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati spoke about by presenting his Parampara list. This is not a Pancharatrika Guru Parampara. This is the Siddha Parampara. The ones cooled by the powerful influence of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will become world leaders, leaders for the entire Gaudiya Vaishnava community. Srila Jiva Goswami, we have been told, did not even initiate a single disciple. But it is very well known that after the disappearance of Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, Jiva Goswami was accepted as the highest authority of all Gaudiya Vaishnavas in Bengal and Braj and in other places. Even up to the time of Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti, Jiva Goswami was always considered to be the highest authority. So, but he never initiated a single disciple. So in Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's arrangement, his Acharya and so on refers to those who are self-manifest. Jiva Goswami, he shone. Vishwanath Chakravarti shone on his own. Nobody came and touched their hair. And it's not like a Pancharatrika. It's not the Pancharatrika system where somebody else is made the next person who becomes the Pancharatrika Acharya. It is not this. This is Bhagavata Vidhi. In several lectures delivered in 1936, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati stressed the need to follow the example of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his Antyalila, final pastimes, by concentrating on the main purpose of life, absorption in remembering Krishna and avoiding asat sangha, association with non-devotees. Addressing the assembled devotees at the last Tirobhav Mahotsav of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur that he would attend, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati spoke of the Bhaktivinoda Dhara, the line of Bhaktivinoda, and the need to preach. We cannot become or make another a Vaishnava. All living beings in the universe are intrinsically Vaishnavas. They simply have to realize it. It is the task of the Vishwa Vaishnava Rajya Sabha to assist such realization in every way. The people of this world are simply measuring in terms of casteism, nationalism, and other temporary inauspicious social divisions. This measuring should be erased not only in Bengal, not only in India, but all over the universe. Past, present, and future, everyone's auspiciousness will come by preaching about Lord Chaitanya. Like itinerant merchants, you should take the wares of Chaitanya Vani, teachings of Lord Chaitanya, throughout the globe. If necessary, go to all four corners of the earth. Violence to oneself and others under the name of Nirjan Bhajan must be stopped. So now, if you engage prematurely in Nirjan Bhajan, first of all, that is violence to oneself. And to not help others when it is the need of the hour, that is also passive violence. Every single door must be knocked on at least once. If the inhabitants sincerely inquire as to which manner of Hari Bhajan may be performed, all right, tell them that the only way is through the Bhakti Vinod Dhara. The Bhakti Vinod Dhara must be kept alive by the kirtan of Shrautavani. Shrautavani. The teachings of the Shruti as coming through the spotless disciplic succession. If the kirtan, if the description, if the glorification of the truth is stopped, then we will be riven from the Bhakti Vinod Dhara. We will be separated from, we'll be split off from the Bhakti Vinod Dhara. Now, Dhara also means stream. So the stream of the teachings of Bhakti Vinod refers to like a waterfall, like a stream. So you can also get away from that. On 24 October 1936 at Calcutta port, he saw off Sri Bhaktisaranga Goswami, who was setting sail for England with instructions to also try to go to America. That same evening, Srila Saraswati Thakur himself left Calcutta by train and the next morning arrived in Puri. Despite sickness, he lectured regularly there over the next 1.5 months. During this sojourn, this visit in Puri, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was approached by a senior judicial officer, Sri Radheshyam Patnaik, who expressed that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had done many beneficial things for the world, but not much for Puri. He suggested that a Bhagavata Sabha, assembly of devotees, be established there as Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had done at Jagannath Vallabh Udyan, at the Jagannath Vallabh Gardens. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati replied, "The time of my departure has come. What can I do now?" And there were other signs that he was preparing to leave. His mood was increasingly withdrawn and meditative, and he openly and repeatedly vented his inner longing to reside at the foot of Govardhan, often quoting Pratyasham me tvam Kuru Govardhana Purnam. O Govardhana, fulfill my desire. This is all Srila Raghunath Das Goswami. Nija Nikata Nivasam Dehi Govardhana Tvam. O Govardhana, give me a dwelling place close to you. Saraswati Thakur regularly had the full prayers in which these lines appeared recited to him. And each morning he would have Kirtan performed in his presence, including singing of Sri Rupa Manjari Padam, Narottam Das Thakur's composition expressing the quintessence of Gaudiya theology, service to the intimate maidservants of Srimati Radharani under the leadership of Sri Rupa Manjari. Sripad Jajavar Maharaj, who had previously sung for him in Mathura, was called from his posting in Gaya to again chant for Srila Saraswati Thakur, who appreciated both the sweetness of Sripad Jajabar Maharaj's voice and the sincerity with which he sang. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati also cautioned, all of you take to sincere Hari Bhajan. There are not many more days. This premonitory hint, this hint of prophecy, along with his physical weakness and disquiet, and frequent reference to Govardhan Bhajan, convinced several devotees that he would soon leave the world. Srila Saraswati Thakur made his last journey from Puri to Calcutta on 6th December, despite it being a particularly stinging winter and hence inadvisable for a patient to travel northward. When the time came to depart for the train station, his driver, Sri Pyari Mohan Brahmachari, tooted the car horn to signal that they should leave. Just then, Srila Saraswati Thakur noticed his disciple, Sri Jadumani Patanaik, standing there and stopped to inquire about his welfare. Jadumani Prabhu said to his son, now take your last darshan of Srila Saraswati Thakur. I think he will not come here again. The boy performed Dandavat to Srila Saraswati Thakur, who noted his clement mien, his mild appearance, and sensed his internal distress. At Puri station, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was seen off by a group of distinguished people who expressed their admiration. Who expressed their admiration for his monumental activities in broadcasting Lord Chaitanya's message throughout India and overseas. En route at Cuttack station, 40 devotees headed by Bhakti Sudhakar Prabhu were waiting to greet him. During the overnight journey, Srila Saraswati Thakur distributed Harikatha non-stop to his disciples. At Howrah station, a large gathering of devotees received him and escorted him to the Gaudiya Math amid a Sankirtan procession in a car profusely decked with flowers. In Calcutta, he immediately resumed his incessant Harikatha, delivering a several-hour lecture that very morning, 7 December. On 13 December, Srila Saraswati Thakur emphasized in his speech at the 6th annual separation ceremony of Jagabandhu Bhaktiranjan Prabhu. We are all sojourners, we are all travelers on the path of death. Everyone must die. Therefore, whether one is male or female, high or low, king or subject, rich or poor, learned or foolish, he can make this exceedingly rare human form of life successful by becoming a servant of the eternally pure, completely blissful Sri Hari. Even in this conditional existence, one can become liberated. Hence, it is overwhelmingly necessary to try for that. On the morning of 18 December 1936, in his room at Sri Gaudiya Math, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur spoke at length to Sundarananda Prabhu and a few Western devotees, his cheeks becoming red with excitement as he forcefully condemned false discipleship. It was his last talk before he manifested the Leela of being bedridden, never to rise again. We will come across that. Last days, shortly thereafter, Srila Saraswati Thakur became afflicted by fever. Punjabi Hari Prabhu called in some of the most reputed doctors in the city to treat his Guru Maharaj, who informed each of them of the temporality of the body and the need to perform Hari Seva. When a doctor wanted to give him an injection, Srila Saraswati Thakur protested. Why are you disturbing me in this way? Simply chant Harinam, that's all. Upon receiving news of Srila Saraswati Thakur's condition, disciples started streaming in from far and near. On 20 December, he rose and startled the also bedridden Ananta Vasudeva Prabhu, whom he had not seen for several days, by visiting him in his room. About 10 days before his disappearance, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati stated that he had much service to perform in Vrindavan, but because of internal quarrels in the mutt, his life was being shortened by 10 years. So this explains why Prabhupada was very particular about setting up a proper center in Vrindavan. Our Prabhupada. On 23rd December 1936, 8 days before leaving this world, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati instructed in a weak, halting voice the devotees assembled at his bedside. Those vital and immortal words were to become famous as his last address, expressing the essence of his perennial message, permanent message, perpetual message, and would be featured in innumerable publications. Sundarananda Prabhu jotted them down. I have upset many persons' minds. Many might have considered me their enemy because I was obliged to speak the plain truth of service and devotion toward the absolute Godhead. I have given them all those troubles only so they might turn their face toward the personality of Godhead without any desire for gain and with unalloyed devotion. Surely someday they will be able to understand that. All of you propagate the message of Rupa Raghunath's Vani with supreme enthusiasm. Our ultimate desire is to become dust at the lotus feet of the Rupanugas. All should remain united in serving the Ashraya Vigraha for the sake of serving the Advaya Gyan. Ashraya Vigraha refers to the perfect pure devotee, spiritual master. Advaya Gyan refers to the supreme absolute truth, who is fully spiritual. Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this ephemeral, in this temporary sphere, you should live somehow or other only for Hari Bhajan. In spite of all dangers, criticisms, and discomforts, do not give up Hari Bhajan. Don't be disappointed that most people in the world do not accept topics of unduplicitous Krishna Seva. Do not forsake your own bhajan of Krishna Katha Shravan Kirtan, which is your all in all. With humility like a straw and forbearance like a tree, you should always perform Hari Kirtan. Let our bodies, which are like those of aged oxen, be offered into the Sankirtan Yajna of Lord Chaitanya and his associates. We do not aspire to be any kind of heroes of karma or dharma, but our constitutional position, and all in all, is to, in every birth, to become dust at Sri Rupa Raghunath's lotus feet. Rupa Goswami and Raghunath Das Goswami. The lotus feet of Sri Rupa Goswami and Sri Raghunath Das Goswami. The Bhakti Vinod Dhara will never stop. Bhakti Vinod Dhara kokono ruddha hobe na. It will never stop. It can never ever be checked. With all your energy, devote yourself to fulfilling the desire of Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur. There are many among you who are well qualified and able workers. We have no other wish whatsoever. Our only motto is Adadana Strinam Dante Idam Yache Punah Punaha Srimad Rupa Padambhoja Dhulisyam Janma Janmani. Taking a blade of grass between my teeth, I fall down and pray again and again to become dust at Srimad Rupa's lotus feet birth after birth. Famous statement of Sri Raghunath Das Goswami. Certainly there are multiple inconveniences while we are in this mortal domain, but there is no need either to be overwhelmed by them or to try to overcome them. Rather, even during the duration of our present life, we must become acquainted with what we shall gain after surpassing all those difficulties, and what shall be the mode of our permanent existence. In this world, we are compelled to make decisions regarding objects that evoke our attraction and repulsion. Both those that we want and those we do not. Attachment and detachment in this damned existence increase according to the degree that we are separated from Sri Krishna's lotus feet. When we are able to transcend the position of attachment and detachment in this world of death and are attracted by the holy name of Godhead, then only can we understand the taste of Krishna Seva Ras. At the present time, Krishna's instructions seem highly startling and perplexing. Knowingly or unknowingly, everyone who is considered a human being is more or less struggling to eliminate those invading elements that baffle our perception of our eternal need. Our only requirement is to enter into the kingdom of our eternal necessity by going beyond dualities. We have no love or hatred toward anyone in this world. All arrangements made herein are but temporary. Therefore, that supreme goal is indispensably necessary for everyone in this world. All of you should work unitedly and harmoniously for the same objective of attaining eligibility for seva to the original Ashray Vigraha. The original Ashray Vigraha is Srimati Radharani. May the conceptions of, he has used an expression, milia mishia. Everyone should be seamlessly integrated in order to serve the teachings of Rupa Raghunath. May the conceptions of the Rupanugas flow in the world. Let us never feel the slightest dejection while engaged in the seven-tongued flame of Sankirtan Yajna. Only if we have undaunted and ever-increasing attachment for it shall we achieve all perfection. So we need to be brave, we need to be firm, brave. Under the guidance of the Rupanugas, all of you should fearlessly and with utmost energy preach Rupa Raghunath Katha. End of quote. As telephone calls bombarded the mutt, 2 telegrams per day arrived from London with anxious inquiries about his condition. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati himself remained anxious for the spiritual condition of his disciples. On 24 December, noticing the absence of the sounds of evening Kirtan lecture, he asked why these had been discontinued and immediately had them resumed. On the morning of 31 December, Srila Saraswati Thakur requested Srimad B.R. Sridhar Maharaj to chant Sri Rupa Manjari Pada. But after Sridhar Maharaj started singing, Kunja Bihari Prabhu directed that he stop and the reputed Kirtaniya, Pranavananda Prabhu, take over. Srila Saraswati Thakur then stated that he was not concerned with melodious intonations. He was not concerned just with some melodious sounds. So Sridhar Maharaj recommenced. Srila Saraswati Thakur next asked Naveen Krishna Vidyalankar Prabhu to chant Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's song beginning Tumho Daya Sagar Tarayite Prani, which is based on the second verse of Shikshashtaka and concludes Atishaya Mandanath Bhag Hamara Nahi Jana Malo Name Anurag Mor Bhakati Vinod Chitta Dukhe Vibhor. Oh Lord, I am extremely unfortunate. My attachment for the holy name has never come about. The heart of Bhakti Vinod is overwhelmed with sadness. Upon hearing these last lines, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati clapped his hand to his forehead as profuse tears of humility decorated his cheeks, warning of the lamentable plight of being unattracted to the holy name. Naveen Krishna Prabhu stopped singing. That morning, Srila Saraswati Thakur also gave many important instructions for continuing the movement, enjoining his disciples to form a governing body of 10 or 12 members and cooperatively conduct missionary activities under their guidance. I have actually seen a photograph of that, the last set of instructions, which was handwritten, and that Kunja Bihari should remain throughout his life remain as the manager. He ordered that construction of a Natya Mandir be begun at Swananda Sugadat Kunj. He asked one disciple, among yourselves, who do you consider most knowledgeable of Siddhanta? The reply was Vasudev Prabhu. Srila Saraswati Thakur affirmed this and stated that Ananta Vasudev Prabhu should continue to preach Rupa Raghunath Vani. He requested that Sundarananda Vidya Vinod Prabhu be directed to complete and publish Vaishnav Manjusha. Didn't happen. Expressed indebtedness to Bhakti Sudhakar Prabhu and thanked him for services rendered and encouraged Brajeshwari Prasad Prabhu of Patna to remain enthusiastic. He asked that his thanks be conveyed to Sakhi Charan Bhakti Vijay Prabhu for his service to Sri Dham Mayapur and told Srimad Bharati Maharaj, you are a practical man, so look after the mission. Either in love or rupture, it is good to maintain the same purpose. Srila Narottam Das Thakur lived by the principle of Sri Rupa and Sri Raghunath. We too should live according to that principle. Then he delivered his final message. All of you present and absent, accept my blessings. Remember that our sole duty and dharma is to propagate service to the Lord and his devotees. Okay, this we will continue next week. So just let me just note it down. Okay, any question? Yes, Prabhu. 1 minute. Shailesh, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhu.
Good. Prabhuji, I had a slight bad internet connection, so I dropped out at the point you were talking about, or where Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur was talking about things that sannyasis and brahmacharis should not do. And within that list, I wasn't sure it was just applicable to brahmacharis or to sannyasis as well, because
He specifically said that for sannyasis.
Because our Srila Prabhupada partook on some of those items, for instance, massaging with oil, etc. How do we reconcile that?
No, there is a great difference between faking.
No, I understand. His instructions were that they should not, were the instructions.
First of all these things, Prabhupada didn't himself ask for it. He didn't even go for a morning walk until his disciples, they took him to a doctor in 1967. And it's only then, one by one, the disciples came forward and they offered. He did not start asking. That's a great difference between you asking for it, which is what was happening in the Chaitanya Math during Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's time. Big difference.
And it's still quite prevalent even within ISKCON now, isn't it? Things like that do go on, even though it was on the list. I mean,
I think that the major issue Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had was with the attitude, because attitude is the foundation. You have the wrong attitude, then even if you seem to be doing the right thing or an acceptable thing, then over time it takes you away from pure devotional service, and then it messes up everything. So it is not just the external activity, because you can see from the end result. For instance, Prabhupada, he convinced devotees from the Western world to take to Krishna consciousness with all of its restrictions, and here we have the most merciful disciple of the toughest Gaudiya Vaishnava Acharya, goes and spreads Saraswata Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And it's not just some variety of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. This is a type of Vaishnavism that was coming from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, with restrictions appropriate for the modern world. He pushed it through. To exhibit that power, phalena parichiyate, you get to understand by the results. A tree is known by the fruits. So that is why even now, there are a number of followers of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Now they are beginning to accept Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj. It is not completely wrong to call him Prabhupada. It is superhuman. Only somebody who either was, who came from the spiritual world, or through whom Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada completely did what he wanted to do. He had to be something of this kind. Now they accept it. Now that is only possible if Prabhupada himself was pure to that extent also. And that also we notice. There's a lot of record about Prabhupada's interactions with his disciples, and many things are coming out, and more disciples are now revealing things. So we begin to understand and see even this massage and all these things started later on. They themselves started it. Otherwise, he didn't bother about it. He was just doing his own thing in India.
My question is not in any way to question Srila Prabhupada. It's just a question of
it's just
these were instructions that, see, one, if your Guru Maharaj has left instructions, I'm just trying to reconcile when is it okay to
No,
not
no, but
observe?
what
and
is
when
the
it-
instruction? What is the instruction? The instruction is you should not be hankering for these things.
Hmm.
That is the instruction. That is the instruction.
Okay.
When Prabhupada came with his Western disciples and went to Gujarat and all these places, he was washing his own clothes. You know, by this time in America, he already had some 8 or 9 centers. And these are all his Western disciples. So it doesn't, you can understand. You can understand.
Another question I have, just for clarification, because the term we read regularly and frequently it comes up, putting straw between your teeth. Is it a sign of humility or a sign of what's the word? You know, sort of like biting your lip in terms of stopping yourself from doing or saying something, or is it a question of trying to show humility?
It's Prabhupada explained that he, during his time, he had actually seen people do that. They would actually put straw between their teeth and they would offer obeisances to indicate that I'm as worthless as a straw. It's a piece of straw. So it appears to have been an actual Vedic gesture.
Yeah, no, because it comes up in the Bhagavatam, several times as well. Regularly it comes up. So I just wanted to know whether it's a mark of showing humility or whether it is showing some sort of a restraint in terms of behavior.
Prabhupada explained it there in the folio. He explained it like this.
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you for that. Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay.
That's it.
Panchakalpatarubhyasya kripasamsabhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha.